Hey there, welcome back to episode 11 of the Power and Potential podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Butu, and today I'm sharing with you some very tactical information. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I do my very own personal year-end review. It is quite the process, it's a bit long, and it does take a while to get through it, but it's incredibly valuable and sheds tons of light on your last year. I always say that self-awareness is a practice, and this is really the perfect example. I actually recommend that we all go through this process once every 3 months because I find that anything longer than that becomes really hard to remember. I always want to make sure that I'm paying attention and seeing the lessons that I need to be seeing in order to grow into the person that I'm capable of being, right? So even though I'm asking you to go through this process now for all of 2018, you can definitely repeat it at the beginning of April and then again in July and then again in September or October. And that way, when you take a look at your full year in 2019, you'll have already summarized everything so well, and everything will just be fresh and ready to be looked at. Not only that, but if you're doing it every 3 months, you have a chance to pivot right away, right? And if you find things that aren't going so well and you need to kind of change directions, you can do that because you're practicing looking at what's working and what's not kind of in real time, right? So it's crazy how when we start tuning into ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings and our behaviors and we start paying attention, we have a whole new level of understanding of who we are. And as a result, we have a whole new level of potential that we can operate within, right? So let's get into how you can go through this for yourself. And before I do that, I want to tell you that I created a workbook for you that you can download and print, which will have all of the questions and prompts that I mentioned to you in this episode. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet, and it like summarizes a little bit of what I'm talking about in this episode. And it also gives you space to fill out your answers to the questions, right? And so you can refer back to it at any time. You can just print out a fresh one. If you want to do the kind of 3, 6, 9 month review, then you can come back to the file and print it again. I know that this process does take tons of reflection, and I wanted to help you get into the good stuff by not making you write down every single thing as I'm talking on this podcast. And I know a lot of people listen to podcasts as they drive. I know I do. So it makes it really hard to take notes. So once you're done listening to this episode, just head on over to the link that's in the show notes and you will find the workbook. So as you can probably imagine, the process of reflection for me is a very personal one. It's not only about your professional life. When I look at my review, I like to take a very holistic approach because I know that every single thing influences every other thing in my life. And that's what I want to be able to help you do as well. So the ultimate goal of doing a review like this is to get closer and closer to the life you actually want to have, like to actually be conscious of the way you're living your life and changes that you need to make in order to improve the way that you live your life. I always talk about designing a life you love, and I know that kind of sounds cliche, but that is precisely what I'm trying to do for myself. I'm trying to organize my life in a way that I can be consciously choosing joy as often as I possibly can. I'm trying to build my life in a way that makes me feel good as often as possible. So, and I mean, does that eliminate the bad things from happening to me? No way. But if I can control what I can control, then I'm going to do that, right? So if you're anything like me and you also want to be very conscious about the way you live your life, I think you are going to like this exercise. So the first part of the review is broken down into 5 categories. And these are just the 5 categories that I use for my review. So I basically kind of chopped up my life in the 5 most important categories, and then I tried to review each one of those separately before moving on to some of the broader questions. Of course, your relationships are very broad, and they can include anybody, people like your kids, your parents, your spouse or partner, your extended family, any friendships that you have, professional relationships. If you have a religious community, that would be involved in there. Anybody in your broader community, essentially, any relationships that you have. So basically, that's one category. The second category is health and wellness. And in that, I include physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. The third category is livelihood or work, essentially. So that can include your job or your business or your side hustle or all of the above, if you have all of the above. The fourth category is lifestyle, And to me, that includes basically your day-to-day routine, what you do in your downtime, what your hobbies are, what are your interests, what do you do in your free time, what do you do for fun, what are your sources of entertainment. That pretty much tells me a lot about your lifestyle. And then the last category is personal growth. So how are you expanding your self-expression? How are you integrating past lessons into future plans? What's your reflection process? What's your introspection process? How are you intentionally growing as a person? So for each of these 5 categories, right, I'll summarize them: relationships, health and wellness, livelihood, lifestyle, and personal growth. So basically, for each of these 5 categories, what I would like you to do is to list at least 3 things that you're proud of yourself for. And if you have more things that you can think of that you're proud of yourself for, go ahead and list them, because there's no limit. There's no limit on the positives. I want you to really gush about everything that you've done really, really well, right? Afterwards, I also want you to list 3 things that you wish were different. So in each of the 5 categories, think about the things that you wish were different. They don't have to be catastrophes. They don't have to be gigantic failures. They don't have to be anything that, rocked your world or anything like that terrible, but things that you just, you could have done without maybe, or you just wish that they were better in some way, shape, or form. So list those out, and you don't have to go crazy on the negatives. I think if you list 3 negatives for each category, then that is really good. And if you have 1 or 2 extras that you're dying to put on there, just put them on there, and it'll make sense once I tell you what's next. So some people will tell you that those negative ones, the failures or the things that you wish were different, are the most important part of the whole review, right? Some people will say that those are the things you have to focus on changing. Those are the things you have to focus on improving. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I actually strongly believe that we should focus on the things that bring us the most joy and fulfillment possible. And the rest of the pieces will eventually fall into place. I believe that if we just do more of the things that bring us joy and fulfillment, naturally we're going to end up doing less of the other things, right? And it's not to say that all these bad things or all the things we don't enjoy or the things that bring us pain are just going to disappear, right? That's obviously not how life works. But like I said, if you focus on more of the positive things and you're more intentional about integrating some of the more positive things in your life, the better you're going to feel overall, and the more capable and confident you'll be in handling and processing some of those harder things. So, to take you a little bit deeper into this process, I want to give you some of my own examples to show you what I really mean, okay? And I definitely want to take you deeper because, bringing up those, remembering and reflecting on the things that made you proud and the things that you wish were different, that's good. That's a good step. But I don't think it actually gives you enough information to be able to work with moving forward. So in order to make the best out of this exercise, I have a challenge for you. I want to challenge you to come up with 1 word that replaces your entire sentence for each of the points that you use. So, for example, under health and wellness, you have 3 things that you're proud of and 3 things that you wish were different. And most likely those are going to be in sentence form, right? But I want you to dig deep and figure out what the source of that point is. So you're going to look for 1 word that summarizes the point, basically. So I call this the root positive or the root negative. It's like when you go to the doctor and you say, I have a headache, and they say, take Tylenol, right? You know that's just a Band-Aid. You know that that's not actually dealing with the root issue, right? Whereas when you say, I have a headache, and the doctor says, okay, let's do some blood work and figure out what's going on, and then eventually they find that you're deficient in some type of vitamin. In that case, you can now take that specific vitamin supplement, knowing that you're addressing the root issue. Your headache's going to go away, and the bonus of getting at the root is that you'll most likely notice a bunch of other positive things that come from dealing with that issue. So let me give you some of my own examples just so that you get what I'm saying. So in the health category, I would say the 3 things that I'm proud of are, number 1, that I successfully lost over 30 pounds for the first time in my entire life. Number 2 is that I prioritize self-care over all other things. And as a result, I showed up better for everyone I care about in my life, including my kids. And number 3, I took up meditation fairly regularly, and I saw huge improvements in my anxiety levels. So if I wanted to replace these successes with just one word, then I would have to kind of dissect them a little bit, especially the first one, because that one needs a little bit of dissection. So I successfully lost over 30 pounds for the first time in my entire life, right? So what? Who cares? Why does that matter, right? Why is that a success? These are the questions I have to ask myself to get to the root word that I'm looking for. Why do I find that brought me joy? What was it about that experience, right? And my answer would be that it's the first time that I actually cared enough about myself to do what I need to do to get there. And it might sound sad and all that stuff, but it's the truth. It's like I always kind of neglected everything about myself. It was always about everybody else. And for the first time in my life, I said no. And I mean, it all started with self-care. Self-care was my word for 2018. So I started working on taking care of myself, and one thing led to another. And so when I ask myself, okay, so I started caring about myself for the first time ever. Okay, so what? Right? So what is like the best question to ask yourself to get a little bit deeper? Or why does that matter? And in this case, it's self-love. It's not actually self-care that feels good in this case. It's self-love. It's the fact that I love myself enough to take care of myself in that way, to break those habits, to develop brand new habits, right? So for me, self-love is the root of that point. And if I want more of this good thing, what exactly is that good thing? Is it more weight loss? No, not really. I mean, at this point in my journey, even if I lost more weight, that would be fantastic. I would celebrate it for sure. But that's not really the root of what's bringing me joy and fulfillment, right? So, like, let's say I'm done losing weight, then what? Or even like when I plateaued at around 30 pounds, the joy was still there, even though I wasn't necessarily losing weight anymore. So it's not about the actual weight loss itself. It really is a lot deeper than that. And so when you're coming up with your points, you need to be able to ask yourself those questions. So what? Why does this matter to me? Why do I consider this a success? Right? So my other 2 points were a lot more direct, I guess. And it was pretty simple for me to take out the root positive words, which were, the second one was that I prioritize self-care over all other things. So for me, the root word of that was self-care, because if I wanted to integrate one thing and I needed to pick a word to represent that, then it would be self-care. And the last one was meditation. So in the workbook, after getting down to your root words, there is a page at the very end that has 2 columns. One is called more and the other is called less. Basically, you would insert your root words in the column that makes the most sense. So if you want more of that thing, usually that's going to be your root positives, then you stick it in the more column. If you want less of that thing, then we're most likely talking about your root negatives, then you're going to put that in the less column. In this case, because we were talking about my wins, I would take those 3 words, self-love, self-care, and meditation, and stick them into the more column. So basically, at the end of this exercise, you're going to have a huge list of root positive words and root negative words. And it's going to be very, very easy for you to figure out what you want more of in 2019 and what you want less of in 2019. And then all that's left to figure out is the how. How are you going to integrate those positive things, and how are you going to take away some of those negative things, or at least decrease them, right? Okay, so I want to go through one of my challenges around health. So we see the other side of getting the root word, the process of getting the root word. So emotional eating is still a problem for me. So in terms of health, I see that as a big problem. It's a challenge that I have definitely overcome, like I've improved, but it's still a thing and it still needs to be dealt with. So I still have to work on handling difficult situations in healthy ways, and I need to develop some consistency around that. For example, sometimes if I have a really stressful day, it becomes extremely hard work to choose a healthy meal for dinner or to choose to go to the gym afterwards. So I believe that I need to develop some consistency there to really solidify my new habits. So that's basically my very long answer to my one challenge. So what would be my root negative here? It could be inconsistency, or, if I ask myself, like, why am I getting inconsistent? Like, I know it's something related to the emotions. So, okay, when I'm feeling off. Okay, so to me, that is all about processing my emotions, right? So I think my root word for this one would actually be dysregulated emotions. So I know that's 2 words and I'm breaking the rules, but it's okay. If you want to use 2 words, then you know what I mean. As brief as possible. Dysregulated emotions is something that is causing me to, it's holding me back, essentially. Right? And so that would be my root negative. And I would take that and I would put that in the column that's titled less. So I know that that's something that I need to do something about, essentially. So I hope you're seeing the pattern of how you actually get to the root word. You kind of have to dig, and you might need to ask for somebody else's perspective. And don't hesitate. You can talk it out with someone and say, I'm thinking about this one issue that I had, and I'm trying to figure out why it bothered me so much, why it brought me so much pain. And I want to understand it a little bit. Can you help me process it? And if they're good, which a lot of people are pretty good at helping us with this kind of thing, is what they'll do is they'll start to ask you questions. Like, why did it bother you? What happened? How did it make you feel? Like those kinds of things. And then, it'll start to, as you talk, it'll just start making more and more sense. So once you've done that for each of the 5 categories, and you have at least 3 root positives and 3 root negatives for each category, then you can go ahead and transfer them over, if you haven't already, to the columns on the last page that I've been telling you about of the workbook. I absolutely love this process because by the time you get to plan your 2019, you're ultra clear about what you want more of and what you want less of in your life. And that is honestly what it's all about. For me, the clarity piece, like this piece that we're working on in this episode and in the workbook, is always the most challenging. But as soon as you have that, figuring out the how isn't that hard, I can find the answers if I don't know them right away of like how I'm going to do something. That's pretty easy nowadays, thanks to Google. But the planning for 2019, which is basically the part 2 of this process, I'm going to save that part of the process for my next solo episode that comes out in 2 weeks on December 27th. So that way, that gives you enough time to go over the review of 2018 first, because you are going to need some time to do this one, right? It does need a lot of reflection. It sometimes needs you to just walk away and then eventually come back to it, right? Okay, aside from that, I've also included a whole bunch of reflective questions that are meant to help you explore parts of your year that maybe aren't top of mind right now. So some examples of those questions are things like, what are some major perspective changes that you had throughout the year? Like, did anything happen that made you change the way you think about yourself, about your family, about your lifestyle, about the world? Anything that really happened that, it could be something that happened directly to you. It could be something that happened politically or something that happened in your community, or anything that made you have major perspective changes. Another thing that I think is really important to explore is, what are the contributions that you made in 2018? And the reason why I think this is so important is because often our source of meaning and fulfillment and satisfaction comes from making an impact on other people. So if you can get clear on how you're making an impact, and, give that some thought. Like, do you like the way you're making an impact? Are you making enough of an impact? Is there a way that you want to explore that further or make an impact in a brand new way? So that section is really interesting to me, and I think that it's something that a lot of us need to pay a little bit more attention to, instead of focusing always on ourselves, to actually start thinking about, what is the value that we bring to other people and what kind of impact are we making? I also ask you to explore your professional accomplishments and achievements. And I mentioned this at the beginning, but this is really just a small part of the review. It is just one aspect of your life, even though we often put so much value on our careers and so much value on our professional accomplishments, but really it's not the end all be all of our lives. Like, there's so much more. And so it really is just a portion of this review. Some other things are like, what are some of the best moments and experiences that you had in 2018? What did you learn from them? What from these experiences would you like to repeat? What would you like to have more of? What are the major lessons learned that you had? And some people would call this failure, but I don't call it failure because it's either you succeeded in whatever you set out to do or you learned a lesson, one or the other, right? And, if we get into that mind frame of always taking the lesson out of failures become a lot easier to handle. So I always think of it like that. What are the major lessons that you learned in 2018? And what did you learn about yourself? About what you like, what you dislike, what you do really well, or what brings you joy, right? What are the things that frustrate you like crazy? It's like anything that you learn, just put it down. And, it almost like really solidifies it, right? So it makes it really real. So once you answer all those questions, I still want you to go over them and get to the bottom of each in order to identify the root positive or the root negative. That is really the point of this whole workbook. That's the point of this whole episode, this whole process of doing a year-end review. It's not about just bringing up old things basically that happened in 2018 and remembering them. That's not the point, right? The point is that we really want to be able to extract the value from those experiences in order to move forward in the direction that best serves us. Literally, this whole process is all about you feeling good at the end of the day. It's not about getting better at things that you're supposed to be good at, right? It's about you showing up as your best and most authentic self and being the human that you really want to be. And then as a result, showing up for other people in the best way possible. This is such a powerful process, and I'm super excited to be sharing it with you because it has helped me so much become so much more self-aware, so much more tuned in to my joy. And, when things aren't going well or when things are going well, I can almost naturally start finding the root causes to things. And it just makes the change process a lot smoother, right? It's also helped me narrow in on what's really important for me. So now that I can identify what feels good, what doesn't feel good, I can get really clear on what my ideal life looks like, and I can create, concrete steps to get me closer to that. So as you can tell throughout this entire episode, having the workbook is actually critical in my opinion, because unless you were taking notes throughout this whole thing, but I think it would be really, really useful to grab that workbook so that you can work through this process as efficiently as possible. So go to the show notes in this episode, either on my website or in the actual details of the episode in your podcast app, and grab the workbook there. Once you download it, you can print it out, and you can print it out as many times as you like, essentially. Can't wait to hear about how you found this year-end review process. Hopefully it's as useful for you as it has been for me. That's why I wanted to share it with you. So I hope it is. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and I can't wait to share the part 2 of this process in 2 weeks from now, which again is all about how to use this review. So basically how to use your root words to plan for 2019 in the right way. Because what I want for you is that year after year, you start getting closer and closer to the ideal life that you want to live. So that will be episode 13. And then the one that's coming out in 1 week from today, which is episode 12, is an interview with a mindfulness expert. And I can't wait to share that one with you as well. Clearly, there's a lot of excitement going on here on this side of the mic. I hope that you are pumped and excited as much as I am. There are amazing things to come and even more exciting things in 2019. So thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really do appreciate it. And of course, if you go through this year-end review, which I hope you do, definitely come on over to Instagram and let me know what you think. I always love to hear your feedback. Okay, enjoy the rest of your week, and I will catch you again next Thursday. Bye for now.